An implosion of light emerged from the center of Shigaraki's finger cluster. The landscape was forced away as if it had been hit by a smash attack from Deku, while several digits flew in different directions. Mei Hatsume's flying camera bot struggled to withstand the rush of air. In an impoverished area, several civilians crowded around a laptop and wondered what was happening. Elsewhere, an old couple was totally confused by the seemingly sudden turn of events. Endeavor's #1 fan explained to everyone around him that Deku has forced his way inside the finger mass. And this dialogue is great. He actually knows Deku's full name. If you remember, when Bakugo appeared on the livestream, he could only remember him as a kid who was taken by the League of Villains. But because Deku was the one to fight Shoto, his favorite hero's son and likely successor, his name was worth remembering. In fact, he probably wanted Shoto to use his fire back then even more than Deku did. A bright light enveloped Deku's face as he lines indicative of All for One spread across it. The light from within the cluster continued to become more and more concentrated. In the center of it all was Deku delivering a direct punch onto Shigaraki, all while keeping his distance from the other parts with his other limbs. Shigaraki now shared a similar appearance. Afterwards, the darkened complex of Shigaraki's mindscape had been obliterated by the combined assault of all the One for All vestiges. All of them except for one. Shimura Nana alone had failed to penetrate the barrier. She immediately looked around herself. Seeing the vastness of the empty space around her, she called out to her various senior users to no avail. Realizing that she was the only one to have failed, the 7th user tried her best to rationalize the issue. She remembered Shigaraki's previous words to her. He made it clear that he also has nothing but hatred for her. She then remembered how one of the flesh clumps that Shigaraki instinctively created resembled her late son. And she didn't believe that she was rejected because she was hated. Seeing her son reminded her of the last time she truly saw him. A little Kotaro begged his mother not to leave him. It was truly a heartbreaking sight. That's when Shimura Nana realized that her own weakness was to blame. Meanwhile, Deku had finally made it to the home that started it all. He began to reach for the buzzer, but was interrupted by an ominous yet all too familiar voice. It asked him what good knowing would do. Deku faced the source with a stoic expression. A dark and distorted version of Deku faced him. It wanted to know what would change once he learns about the past. So, Horikoshi finally did it. We finally have an official version of Evil Deku. The real Deku immediately realized that this depiction was how Shigaraki sees him. The villain was also talking to him through it. Deku made it clear that he wasn't really sure, but he didn't want to finish things without knowing. Dark Deku told him to die. In response, Deku apologized for the intrusion. In reality, Dark Deku had already launched an attack in the form of Truck-kun. He said, "Catch this isekai since you want to enter different worlds so badly." Deku jumped out of the way as quickly as he could. The driver yelled at him and questioned where the kid's parents were. Honestly, I wish he would have asked him where his dad is. This was actually a memory of Shigaraki's that has been spawned in as a hazard. And this moment could have actually been fatal since Deku's bag was damaged by it. From there, Shimura Nana appeared by his side. She explained to Deku that they were now deep within Shigaraki's consciousness. And as a user of One for All, he has a physical form that can interact with the world within. Deku was surprised to see her. Ashamed of her own failure, the 7th apologized since she was the only one who didn't successfully transfer. Deku still smiled since he was happy to have her with him. She averted her eyes with a bashful expression. She added that this place is Shigaraki's core, his origin, his most fragile weak spot. The Shigaraki they'd find here would be very, very vulnerable. Deku needed to successfully make contact with him and strike at that very origin. So he began racing forward to do exactly that. Meanwhile, Shimura Nana contemplated the notion of an origin. But as Deku drew closer, Dark Deku leapt into the sky. Only, he wasn't Deku anymore. In an instant, Deku was pinned to the ground by none other than the hero killer Stain. The noseless slasher told him that he was about to die. This was a reenactment of the first time Shigaraki met Stain. Deku was wounded by the attack and recognized his former adversary. But just as quickly, that missing nose went to the next extreme in the form of Redestro and his absolute beak of a nose. He also had an echoed question. What burdens do you bear? What do you seek to build? Which are also very valid questions to be asked of Deku. This overlap of one for all and all for one isn't a one-way street. Deku's memories have been bleeding over too, and Deku clearly wants things to be different in society. But how? And oh man, the nose shenanigans were not over, as Redestro's nose disturbingly became Overhaul's beak of a mask. He used recycle words to ask if Deku had a plan. Responding with fury, Deku admitted that he doesn't have a plan at all, and told the obstruction to get out of his way. He forced himself beyond the distraction and ran headfirst for the door ahead of him. When he flung it open, it became the photograph of Shimura Nana and Kotaro that Shigaraki's sister had shown him. As Hana told her little brother it was a secret, Deku's eyes went wide. This was the first time Shigaraki learned about his grandmother. The picture of her and her precious son made Shimura Nana's eyes begin to water. As Deku and Nana moved on, Hana's words continued behind them. She wanted the two of them to become a brother-sister hero team, but they would need to keep it a secret from their father. And speaking of their dad, Deku opened the door to see Kotaro strike an obscure Tenko as Mon barked with disapproval. Deku's eyes went wide with focus as he found what he was looking for. Shimura Nana covered her mouth as large tears escaped from the borders of her eyes. Kotaro gritted his teeth while looking down at what can only be assumed to be a terrified Tenko. Deku's body sprang into action faster than his brain could totally process the situation. He just knew that the shadowy figure had to be Shigaraki. But when he reached out, there was a barrier keeping him from interfering. He wasn't able to force his way through and realized that he was being rejected. He was so close, yet kept at a distance. Kotaro began sharing the same words we've heard before. He expressed that it wasn't Tenko's grandmother that he saw in the picture. To him, she was a monster who abandoned her own child. Her vestige couldn't stop crying now. It was then that she understood that Kotaro did not keep that picture of them because he likes it. Shigaraki's father continued to say what he believes heroes truly are. Shimura Nana realized that he kept it because he couldn't free himself from it. Kotaro said that heroes were people who hurt their own families for the sake of helping complete strangers, which honestly isn't a great argument for him to stand behind since he's hurting his own family and not even helping any strangers. In that sense, he's just a villain, which is how his son ended up seeing him forever. Shimura Nana recognized that for the rest of his life, her son could not let go of her abandonment. And the very same scar she left on Kotaro spread to Shigaraki in the form of something even worse. Despair began to envelop her as she wondered what things would have been like if she defeated All For One and returned to her son. The late hero began furiously holding her own head. She apologized to her son internally as he raised his hand at Tenko yet again. And okay, this is just crazy. Hitting the kid for looking at a picture is wild enough, but for him to hit him again, completely unprovoked, is just madness. Tenko didn't even say anything. And although this was a reenactment of a memory, Deku frantically called out to Shimura Nana to do something. And that's when his extended hand began to glow. Shimura Nana continued to apologize for being such a weak mother as she moved towards her son. She stopped his hand as Deku reached out to Tenko in a way that was very reminiscent of his mother's approach later on. And with this act, the 7th user finally succeeded along with the others in shattering the barriers of Shigaraki's heart. While holding him, she told her son how sorry she was for not returning to him. And despite being a vestige himself, it seems like Kotaro got the message. Shimura Nana apologized to Tenko too. She told him that it was all Grandma's fault. But as the darkness partially left Tenko to reveal a crying child, her words were denied, as it wasn't all her blame to accept. With the two of them gone, the situation shifted yet again. Tenko was holding onto his pet dog while telling him that he can't take it anymore. This, my friends, in more ways than one, is the beginning of the end. The first instance of Tenko using decay. And if you notice, Deku's attire has changed. He has returned to his middle school outfit, a symbol of a very vulnerable time for him. And I imagine he will continue to regress until he is just as small as Tenko is, at the point where they are the most alike. Now, My Hero Academia will be on break next week, but this chapter gave me exactly what I needed to construct what may very well be the final major theory for this series, so I hope you guys can look forward to that. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.